My name is Claire and I'm 26 years old. I never imagined I had a wicket in a hospital bed fighting for my life, only to learn my parents told the doctor they couldn't come because my sister Bethany was walking her dog. The doctor warned them that night might be my last, yet they never showed. This was not the first time they had chosen Bethany over me, but I decided it would be the last. I'm going to tell you about the letter I left behind. A letter that changed everything. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a house with a white picket fence that looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Martin and Sarah Hayes, had two daughters. I was the oldest and Bethany arrived 2 years later. From the moment she was born, there was a noticeable difference in how my parents treated us. When I was 7, I won first place in the school science fair. I rushed home, blue ribbon in hand, bursting with excitement, only to receive a quick pat on the head before their attention returned to Bethany, who was learning to ride her bike. I convinced myself that learning to ride a bike was a bigger milestone. By the time I was 12, this pattern was my reality. My mother would give a polite note when I bought straight A+ but reserve heart, a static praise for Bethany, who had an B- in art. My father once told me he was proud when I qualified for the state swimming championship, but couldn't attend because Bethany had a minor cold. I became an expert at making excuses for them. They were busy. Bethany was younger and needed more attention. I was more independent and could handle things on my own. What complicated thing further was my health. At 16, I was diagnosed with a straight autoimmune disorder, which required daily medication and regular monitoring. My condition could be triggered by stress, certain foods, and particularly animal danger. Even with the serious diagnosis, my parents treated my health issues as an inconvenience. My mother would sigh about rearranging her schedule for my doctor's appointments, and my father would complain about the medical bills on the drive to emergency room. Bethany, on the other hand, was the picture of vitality. She became a high school soccer star, and my parents never missed a single game. They sat in the stands with a gained homemade signs cheering her name while I sat beside them, often feeling dizzy from a flare-up but determined to support my sister. As we grew older, the favoritism became more pronounced. For college, my parents said they could only afford to help one of us, and since Bethany wasn't as academically inclined, she would need to support more. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, graduating with a 4.0 GPA. Meanwhile, Bethany dropped out after 1 semester because it was too stressful, and my parents comforted her by buying her a brand new car. Despite all this, I maintained hope. I kept trying to earn the approval. I graduated with honors, got a good job, and visited home regularly, always bringing thoughtful gifts. But no matter what I did, Bethany remained the sun around which our family orbited. 3 months ago, after the holiday, where I felt like a guest in my own home, I decided to clear some space. I moved to a city 30 miles away, close enough to visit but far enough to establish independence. My apartment was pet-free, and I found a peace I had never known. Bethany, now 23, still lived at home. He cycled through a series of part-time jobs, and my parents continued to support her emotionally and financially. The dynamically reached a new level when Bethany decided she wanted a dog, an expensive purebred semioid named Birdie. Despite knowing about my severe allergies to animal dander, my parents not only approved but paid for the dog. They converted their home office into a special room for him. When I expressed concern about not being able to visit, my mother simply said, "You can take your medication, sweetie. Brittany really needs this dog for her emotional well-being. That was my family in a nutshell. Brittany's emotional well-being always trumped by my physical health. I clung to a fantasy of my family, hoping things would change. It would take a near-death experience for me to finally understand that no amount of trying would ever be enough. 3 days after this disastrous dinner, what I had a sweat allergic reaction from being around Buddy. I woke up feeling like a truck was parked on my chest. I had forced myself to go to work for a presentation I had spent weeks preparing for. But my colleague Jessica took one look at me and insisted to see a doctor. I called my doctor's office and the nurse told me to go to the emergency room immediately. Jessica drove me and I made a call to my parents. The call went to voicemail. I then called Bethany. "Hey, what's up?" she answered, Buddy barking loudly in the background. I explained I was having a stray reaction and was on my way to the hospital, asking her to tell our parents. "Oh, that sucks," he said, sounding distracted. "I will tell them when I see them. They are taking me and Buddy to that new dog park today." By the time we reached the hospital, I was struggling to stay conscious. My throat was closing and my skin was on fire with hives. What followed was a blur of activity, injection monitors, and questions from doctors. The last clear memory I have is calling out for my neighbor, Miss Rodriguez, to feed my cat, as I was concerned about my pet being alone. Then darkness. I later learned that the hospital staff made multiple attempts to contact my parents. They finally reached them 4 hours after I had been admitted. The conversation was relayed to me by a nurse named Brenda. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, your daughter Clair is in critical condition. Tonight might be her last night. You really should be here. There was a pause before my mother spoke. "We can't just leave Brittany standard with her dog. Surely Claire will stabilize soon. We can come by tomorrow if she's still there." The nurse was so shocked she could barely respond. As I drifted through varying states of consciousness, I was regularly aware of a kind nurse holding my hand. You hang in there, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm staying right here with you." It was a stranger compassion when my own family had abandoned me. By morning, my condition had stabilized, but the damage to my heart was done. Colleagues and friends came to visit, bringing flowers, cards, and genuine concern. Not once did my parents or Bethany call or text to check on me. The fantasy I had clung for to 426 finally shattered. For the first time, I saw my family exactly as they were, not as we wished them to be. And with that clarity came a plan. The letter that would change everything. On the 6th day of my hospitalization, I finished writing a 4-page handwriting letter. It was a release of pain I had carried for too long. "Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will have been discharged from the hospital where I spent a week fighting for my life. The doctor called you the first night and told you I might not survive until morning. You choose not to come because Bethany needed help walking her dog. This was not the first time you have chosen Bethany over me. It has been the patron of our family. Since my earliest memories for 26 years, I have made excuses for your behavior, telling myself that Bethany needed you more, that I was stronger, that someday you would see and value me equally. I nearly died waiting for that day to come. I write this note out of anger, but from a place of clarity and self-preservation. I can no longer participate in a family dynamic that consistently places my sneers and even my life blue those of my sister and her dog. From this point forward, I am stepping back from our relationship. I need time and space to heal from the lifelong pattern of being treated as less than. I will not be connecting you for the foreseeable future, and I ask that you respect my decision. I'm not doing this to punish you, I'm doing it to save myself. Clair. The next day, as I was being discharged, I asked Brenda, the nurse, to place the seal letter on my empty bed. When my parents arrived, Natalie, my colleague, picked me up and we waited in a coffee shop across that street. At precisely 3:15 p.m., I watched my parents walk through the hospital doors, only coming to see their daughter a full week after she had nearly died. I didn't know how they would react, but I know with absolute certainty that our relationship would never be the same. And for the first time in my life, that thought didn't fill me with dread, but with a profound sense of liberation. The healing process was long. I stayed with Jessica for 2 weeks, regaining my physical strength and beginning to process the emotional trauma. With the help of the therapist, Dr. Chen, he explained that I was in a classic golden child scapegoat dynamic. I had been running on a hamster wheel of achievement and self-sacrifice, hoping to finally win the love that should have been freely given. I learned to grieve the parents I deserved but never had, and to build a life based on my own values. My parents' reaction to that letter was telling. My mother's voicemail dismissed my experience as dramatic. My father's email showed some introspection but still minimized the lifelong pattern of neglect. I decided to maintain my boundary with them. However, Bethany began to reach out more frequently. During a phone call, she admitted, "I didn't know it was that serious. I guess I have never had to think about it before. Things have always revolved around what I want." I explained that I had been drawing under the pressure to be perfect and that I need to learn who I was outside of that dynamic. 6 weeks after my discharge, my parents showed up at my apartment announced. I stood my ground at the door, refusing to let them in and reminding them of my boundaries. My father accused me of filling Bethany's head with accusation. My mother cried, asking why I was being so cool. The familiar guilt tried to rise in me, but I pushed it down. "I nearly died, Mom," I said, "alone in a hospital because you and Dad chose Bethany's dog over me. I'm not responsible for your feeling about that reality." I closed the door, my heart racing but my resolve firm. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. That evening I received a text from Bethany. "Mom and Dad came home really upset. Dad keeps saying you have changed. Mom is crying in their bedroom. What happened?" I replied. I stood up for myself. "It's new for all of us." A response came after a long delay. "I think I need to learn how to do that too." The letter I left on that empty hospital bed did change everything. Not by magically transforming my parents, but by finally giving me permission to transform myself. I am no longer the scapegoat seeking is redemption, but Clair, a woman who knows her words, sexual healthy boundaries, and builds a life that honors her true value. I have learned that true families isn't defined by blood, but the people who show up, respect your need, and care for you consistently. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I'm facing it as a woman worthy of love and respect.